Greetings everyone. We're all full up, so we might as well begin a little early. What a fabulous crowd. As well as all the other helpers, I think I need a thing one and a thing two. One little issue just we've got to make sure about is no people standing at the back. They need to go into the back room because we're very conscious of fire issues here. We have a few basic rules here tonight. The first is that we run to time, even early, and there's no mucking around. The second is that you'll be subjected to dreadfully weak jokes. Too bad. It's all designed to help us not take ourselves too seriously, no matter that politics is a serious business. We can listen to each other better if we relax a bit. I'm Philip Somerville, aka the Cat in the Hat, and I've done this a few times wearing my silly hat. As I always say, I know some candidates will make fools of themselves, and I don't want them to feel lonely. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, I'm male, pale and stale, and you'll just have to put up with that. I'm also smack in the middle of the terrible boomer generation. Dear, oh dear. Good to see you all. Did any of you drive over any fiscal potholes on the way here? There are a few others with silly hats and maybe name tags scattered around. They're helpers and members of the congregation here to answer questions. Opoho's minister, Claire Lind, is among them. She might be up the back. There she is. Where are you, Claire? Julie's helping in the Morrison Lounge. Chanel's on data projector. Benjamin on sound. Mark and Michael on the door. Hamish helping the microphone. John is behind the link to the packed lounge next door and was a big help with the PowerPoints. He's operating one in tandem with here. Andrew's here to prompt Steve, our stag, and help with the timing. And several others have also chipped in. Andrew would ding his triangle when there are 15 of the allotted seconds left to go for the speakers. Steve will roar as time runs out. Sometimes half-finished sentences will remain that way. Steve, give us a roar, please. Special thanks to Philip Fleming, a leading Dunedin musician and Opoho resident. He set a fabulous tone and he'll also be leading us in the national anthem. Thanks to Bert, another Opoho resident. He's filming down the back. The event is not being live streamed, but we have a YouTube channel set up and we hope to host it later tonight if all goes well. Details later. Thanks as well to the ODT and its cartoonist Yayo for helping keep us entertained before we started and at half time, and Steve for the stag call. The night shelter was our charity last time. Tonight it's Presbyterian Support Otago's food bank. PSO's Family Works is but one branch of the organisation, and one corner of the Family Works is about food parcels. Last year, 4,462 were supplies. That's an average of 86 for every week of the year, and that's an average, not an up to figure. You're welcome. We're a bit slow tonight, aren't you? You're welcome, but there's absolutely no obligation to contribute cash or goods. Miriam and Claire are among those helping with us. Miriam's in the green hat. There at the front door are containers and collection bank, and there is an account number. We were going to ask Sanitarium to contribute packets of wheat bricks, but they said they'd run out. Now, health and safety. Now, seeing none of you are transport ministers, I'll only have to tell you this once. Not 12 times, or was it 19? Exits, there's one behind me. Out the door you came and through to the lounge at the back. Toilets are through the back, outside and round or through. And there's a fire extinguisher at the back, and I have another one here. It's just in case we have to put out another Labour policy bonfire. What a flaming terrible joke. That's better. Now, most of us have little opportunity these days to sing as a community. We have that chance now with our national anthem. Stand if you wish and are able to. I'm such an awful singer, you better drown me out. Thank you. Now, here's the pool of candidates for the Dunedin Electorate. We restrict this meeting to those candidates who have parties who have consistently polled more than 1%. Unfortunately, our time is too limited for anything more. Most of the candidates here tonight are after your party vote. An exception is independent Jim O'Malley, making the cut as a senior city councillor. We have apologies from ex-Tim Newman, who is away. No, he wasn't one of the 5 candidates who quietly disappeared off Act's list. Francisco Hernandez has been a bit off colour and is replaced by Greens co-leader Marama Davidson. Michael Woodhouse is replaced by Nationals James Christopher.
Where's Woody?
Rachel this year became a minister. That made me really nervous. Being in Labour's diminishing and incident-prone cabinet, I feared she might have had to resign before this meeting came around. I wondered if I also should check whether Marama was a crybaby like Charlie Shawbrook was supposed to be. Perhaps not. Here's the electorate, stretching from Waikato and taking the peninsula until 2020 we were called Dunedin North. Here's the party vote from 2020. Labour reached 50%, National 25.6%, and the rest were also Greens. 2020 was in some ways an aberration, so I put up 2027. National on 44.4%, Labour, the Greens and New Zealand First combined to make 50.4%. Then ACT was 0.5% of the party vote. Now the Dunedin Electorate in 2020, where the Greens were second, topping National in the party vote. Labour and the Greens combined together in 2020 in Dunedin for 72.9% of the party vote. New Zealand First didn't make 1,000, one of its worst results. David Clark's majority was a mere 15,521. 2017, when the electorate was Dunedin North, was closer. National was a clear second ahead of the Greens in that all-important party vote. For your information, here are the Dunedin candidates from parties with any chances of being in Parliament. Their list placing: Rachel Brooking, Labour 23, Francisco Hernandez, Greens 17, Keegan Langeveld, New Zealand First 20, Ben Peters top 3, Tim Newman ACT 53, James Christmas is 28 on the national list. With glasses of water for the candidates out in front. I wasn't sure whether they're half full or half empty. I'll let them judge. And if the candidates get hungry, of course, there it is, a selection of some bread and butter. Of course, it includes GST. There's also a rock, as in rock solid. I think you might have heard that before. And I couldn't find a corset for the squeezed middle. Now for a short section called Did You Hear? It starts with a mild dig and then pushes the boat out. Did you hear that Labour was taking GST off sausage rolls? Did you hear National has examined the figures from the foreign buyers tax on houses worth more than 2 million? They thought something must be wrong when half the houses in the calculations came from South Dunedin. National also plans to keep the electric vehicle clean discount, but only for Teslas. Did you hear New Zealand First is reintroducing the Provincial Growth Fund, but only if 95% of it is spent in Northland? Did you hear in reality that Winston Peters, in reality, once actually gave a straight answer to a question while not personally attacking the interviewer? and that Christopher Luxon actually once answered a question. Did you hear the Greens want a special tax on cis white males? It's called the privilege tax, otherwise known as the anti-violence tax. Did you hear that those staunch believers in evidence-based decision-making discovered they weren't doing too well? So they had to follow the data and they all went home and gave up. Did you hear the reason Jim O'Malley is standing? Because he was sick of having to deal with the mayor and all those councillors. He thought Parliament would be a lot less trouble. So next up, we'll keep it moving, and next up is icebreakers. It's an innovation this year that I copied from a Hawke's Bay candidate meeting. Let's personalise our candidates for a few minutes. Yes, they're people like us. They've been told to bring a small personal item that reveals something about themselves and speak to it. They're going to get 30 seconds each to talk about what it means to them. Andrew will ding the triangle after 15 seconds and Steve will roar at 30. Again, if you're halfway through a sentence, that's too bad. And the order. First up, Rachel Brooking. Yes,
That's great. Kia ora koutou. Here I have a bracelet that my grandmother Peg gave me for my 21st birthday. It's made in Dunedin and it's special to me because my grandmother was an awesome community person, the matriarch of the family and someone I miss dearly.
Thank you. Ian Peters.
Here I have one of my children's books that I read them every night. Not this one necessarily, because they are currently getting put to bed now by my wife, but I really treasure being able to read to them every night and get them to sleep.
Next up, James Christopher at Christmas.
Well, at the risk of getting told off for hawking my own product, this is a book I wrote with my old boss, Chris Phillison, about treaty settlements. And the reason it's important to me is working on treaty settlements taught me more about the history of this country than anything else. I grew up going to school thinking England had all the interesting answers, studying kings and queens. We've got a lot more interesting history in this country, but we all need to learn it.
Keegan Langeveld.
Mine's a slight cop-out because I take it with me everywhere I go, but it's the lanyard I got in my first year of being part of New Zealand First. It's just a gentle reminder of how long it's been and how far I've come, especially working with Young New Zealand First, and we've just brought in some new student loan reform policies as part of the manifesto, so it's a cool big reminder for me.
Marama Davidson.
I got the memo about bringing something personal just as I was about to depart from Auckland a few hours ago. If I had have bought something, it would have been one of the cuddly toys that I have on my bed in Wellington. I do not live in Wellington, but when I'm sitting and often away from my babies in Mokopuna, I like to cuddle them as if I've got them there with me. Kia ora.
Now, next up is opening salvos, and this is where the candidates... Oh, Jim.
No, the last set, right?
No.
Actually, I didn't get the memo, but I tell you what we grabbed on the way out. It was my father's dog tags. He flew in 75 Squadron during World War II, and in many respects, he is the person I've always wanted to follow in terms of the example he gave in life.
Next up, we have a section called Open Salvos. The candidates will choose how they use their 90 seconds. The warning at 75 seconds and the roar at 90 again. This will be from the lectern. And first up is Jim O'Malley, not forgotten this time. The last shall be first.
Thank you very much. I'm standing in front of you looking for the candidate vote and not the party vote, and I would hope that when you're making that decision and voting on this Saturday that you can separate the two apart. They play a very different function for what you're wanting out of a politician. What you're wanting out of your candidate, your representative in the electorate, is someone who will take the electorate to Wellington and make sure that we get the right level of attention from central government that we need. The reason I'm actually standing is because I had planned on completely leaving politics in 2 years' time and not running again for council, and I am not running again for council in case people think I'm doing this to run from here. But as chair of infrastructure, I had seen the way that we have not been getting what is the legitimate share for the Dunedin area. It's not that I want us to get more or unfair advantage. I actually asked the people who work in the infrastructure department to look at the government Crown spends on all the major cities, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin, and we get per capita 1/3. We get 1/30th of what Auckland gets in terms of special capital spends. I'm here basically to bring Dunedin's voice to Wellington and make sure that you are represented and heard when people are making decisions on where to invest. We've invested in the 3 centres too much. We now start to invest in the rest of New Zealand.
Steve was right on the edge. Now next, Keegan.
G'day everybody, as mentioned I'm Keegan Langeveld and I'm the New Zealand First candidate for Dunedin. However, I'm not looking for your candidate vote, we're just after the party vote. This time around we're promising 5 key things, which we call our election plans. They are defending freedom and democracy, tackling the rising cost of living, tackling the rising crime rates, creating opportunity for all New Zealanders by living up our health, education and infrastructure, and improving the lives of our seniors. I'll no doubt dive into those 5 planks as we talk about policy tonight. But the polls are showing that we're facing a change in government, and both leaders of the opposition parties are inexperienced, haven't sat around the cabinet table. So we're saying take out some insurance and party vote New Zealand first to have some experience around that table to make sure that there's an adult in the room. Thank you.
Ben Peters.
Kia ora koutou, welcome and thank you very much for having me here. I'm standing for the Opportunities Party. This election we want to make a really clear statement that we need to invest in our future. Young people are our future and they're being sorely left behind. We have an entire generation that are not going to be able to own a home. Myself, I live intergenerationally, which is a really lovely way of saying with mum and dad. Although in my case it's a co-owned home with my mother and father-in-law, as well as an aunt who's 70 years old who lives with us. So we've got a very big family that we share there. It does show that I can work very collaboratively. We moved in together just before lockdowns happened, and we survived. And I also have a wife and 2 children there. The Opportunities Party has a premier policy here as the teal card. We want to make a clear statement of investment in the future. It includes free healthcare for under 30s, free dental for under 30s, 1,500 towards e-scooters, e-bikes, so that we can get a mode shift in transport, which will really help with our emissions, as well as getting young people used to using those kinds of transport, as well as free public transport. We also have a civics course that upon completion, it's an optional civics course, will teach things like tax literacy as well as driving, first aid, that kind of thing. Upon completion, we'll give them $5,000 kickstart into the KiwiSaver. So it's a really important thing. Poll-wise, we're going to an island, and therefore every party vote for top counts. Vote top. Thank you.
Marama Davidson.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Imagine an Aotearoa where absolutely everyone was able to have enough to live a good quality life with dignity, had a home where they could put down roots, where we could lead the world in taking strong action against climate, where we were protecting papatua nuku in our living systems. We can actually have that world. What we have in Aotearoa today still upholds an entire economic system that instead trashes papatua nuku, continues to ensure many people miss out while a few have more than they could ever need. And all of that is because of political choices and political will. All of that can change with political choice and political will. And the power of every single person's vote cannot be underestimated. We know that when everyone votes, the values of manaakitanga, of protecting papatua nuku, of protecting our communities win. And that is what I am asking for today. With a party vote, we can get the amazing Fran, who I am subbing in off the reserve bench for today. And it would be fantastic to have more Green MPs around the table, because we have been clear and consistent about not only how we can change that system to make sure everyone has enough and we are protecting our environment, but we have shown that we've got the history, the record, and the solutions to ensure that we can get that Aotearoa vision. Kia ora.
James Christmas.
Well, kia ora, good evening everyone. My name is James Christmas. I'm a lawyer. I am a mainlander, I promise, although I'm not from Dunedin. I'm filling in for my colleague Michael Woodhouse, and I have actually spent the vast majority of the campaign here, and I've enjoyed it immensely. Most people have been very polite and nice to me, so perhaps Dunedin is calling, but I might need to talk to my partner about that. Let me get to the point. We're running a national on a platform of rebuilding our economy to provide the conditions to restore growth in this country, and we want to reduce the cost of living. To do that, we have to get inflation under control. We have to ensure taxpayers are getting value from every dollar spent by government on their behalf, and we have to provide some highly targeted tax relief after years of high inflation and no adjustment in those income tax brackets. Most of all, I think we need some competence, aspiration and energy back in the administration of government, and that's why I've thrown my hat in the ring despite never having had any intention to do this until about a year ago. So that's what I'm about, that's what my party is about. It is crunch time now, as much as I appreciate Keegan's very kind offer of experience around the cabinet table. A party vote for national will ensure that we have the biggest national caucus possible, and just to speak out of total self-interest, I am on the cusp of getting in, so I'd appreciate a party vote for National was a party vote for me too, and I promise I'm not that guy. But I really do want us to get our country back on track and play a part in that. So I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
So kia ora koutou everyone. I'm really here to ask for 2 ticks Labour. I'm being a bit greedy. I want both of those votes. So I grew up in Dunedin. My parents both were at university at different times, and I went to school here, studied at university, and have spent most of my adult life here, not all of it, but have 3 beautiful children, all of whom have just switched over into teenagers. They're at various schools in Dunedin. My husband here, who's an oncologist in town, and we're very committed to Dunedin because it's the best place to be, obviously. Yeah. So, and since I became a politician in 2020. I was sitting over here 3 years ago listening to this debate, and I became a list MP. So being a list MP, I've been focusing on the wider region and on environmental issues, and after Easter I was really privileged to be made a minister. So I've got oceans and fisheries portfolio, also food safety, associate environment, so that's waste mainly, and also associate immigration. That's been a phenomenal learning experience that I've very much enjoyed, and realised the gravity of the decisions that I make are really important. Really proud to be part of Labour and the big RMA reforms that we've done. Lots of difficult structural things, doing a whole lot with infrastructure and an infrastructure commission, and thinking about the long terms, decreasing emissions 3 years in a row through an emissions reduction plan that goes across the economy. And for Dunedin, obviously we have that 1.68 billion hospital that's rising out of the ground, as we can see right now. So thank you, 2 ticks Labour.
Politicians and prospective politicians, at least they're good at one thing, they're all very good at keeping to time. Now, I've got questions that are coming via me, 1 or 2 supplied ones and some from me. We'll start at one end, go to the other end, and then go backwards and forwards to save the time. And the first one is just a general one, university funding. How committed are you to adequately funding universities? And we'll give up to 45 seconds each for this one. I'll start, Keegan.
Right, so as I mentioned before, we've just released our full policy manifesto, which includes our tertiary education things. I was very privileged to be part of the team that drafted that, and we have committed to investigating how we can address funding shortfalls. We don't want to pretend like there's a one-size-fits-all solution. It could be very different per institution. So we committed to investigating that as part of government.
Kia ora. I currently work at the university. I'm a teaching fellow in the biochemistry department. My mother-in-law also works in the geology department, and she's currently having to rewrite her CV as they go through a management change process. This is something that I care very deeply about. I don't have a dollar figure that I can commit to, but I can absolutely commit to working collaboratively with whoever is the majority government to ensure that we're well represented down here, to make sure that we get that funded as well as possible. In particular, also I know this about universities, but the Polytechnic is another area that also needs addressing. Te Pukenga was incredibly expensive and hasn't addressed the core issues of funding our trades.
We've been lucky in our party to have my colleague Penny Simmons from Invercargill from PWSIT in charge of tertiary education. I've learned a lot from her about the tertiary sector. Basically it comes down to this. No one wants to be in the situation where at the moment I was at the TEU Stockworth meeting at Otago University and heard the stories of the people under incredible stress. Their jobs are on the line. The fact is we're unable to go and put a huge injection of funding right into that because there are too many different priorities at the moment. If we want to keep these public services, if we want to fund our institutions like the University of Otago, we have to get inflation under control. Inflation is killing university spending. We have to get our international students back in. We were way behind the ball on that. Too many have gone to Australia and to Canada. And we have to get the economy growing again. We can't keep having the same conversation.
Thank you, James. Oh.
It's inequality that is harming university institutions and students and staff. We believe in a strong, well-funded tertiary institution and education sector should be a public common good, accessible to all, and students shouldn't have to worry about paying the rent and being cold and having a kai. Student universal allowances is what the Green Party are able to continue to propose again, as well as free public transport for students. But we really want to stress that tertiary education should be seen as core public good, and we've got enough. It's about making decisions to not continue giving the wealthy more and more, and actually rebalancing wealth to make sure we have got good public funded tertiary education sector.
So the University of Otago is of critical importance to all of us here in Dunedin. We call ourselves a university town, so we need a good, strong, fantastic university, and as an institution, but all the people who make it up. Labor had a 5% increase for funding in the budget, and then a further increase at the end of July when Otago and Victoria were getting into trouble. The main thing we're doing is reviewing the funding model for universities. That's crucially important, I think. It's been based on the bums on seats for a long time. That clearly isn't working when we have things like COVID and international borders closed, and really high employment rates as well. So these things are cyclical, and that doesn't work in cycles like this.
Thank you, Marama. Rachel.
I think the question is really how committed are you to adequately funding government? The main issue we're facing here is the lack of resources in the government. There's not enough money to go around because there's not enough money coming in. So we're fixing little breaks all over the place, but the core problem was the introduction of the first full-time student. It was the commoditisation of education. It should go back to a bulk funding kind of model, and frankly, we have to bring in upper limits of taxes. The upper limit of tax is too low. It's not bringing enough income into the government. I'm here also to start a movement, the 2033 movement, which is about forming a new left, and most of it's going to be about social equity and wealth distribution. If we do that, the universities won't be in trouble.
Cheers.
Tim won't get a lot of time to think about this one, but here we go. 30 seconds, tough to answer in that time. Should our present hate speech laws be extended? Is free speech sufficiently protected?
30 seconds. Listen, hate speech is dangerous, but we've got to also be very careful that we don't get into an environment of actually censoring people when they take us to the edge of a question or an idea. I think we're in a place that we really are quite dangerous in terms of how we speak to each other, and we really need to be very careful in what we do next.
Yeah, I agree with Jim's point there, but also note that our hate speech laws are probably not as strong as they could be, which is why they were looked at earlier in this term. But it's really tricky stuff, and we need to have very good public conversations about it to make sure that we understand exactly what the changes are and why they're needed. So definitely more work to be done in that space.
This country has never properly protected hate speech, properly protected free speech, I should say. It's a whole generation of my grandparents and her time who were violently beaten up in schools for just speaking their own language. This country has never properly given equity and power to all people to have free speech. Only some people have entire radio stations and media platforms to speak very hateful views, which we have the examples of right here in Aotearoa, can lead to death and terrorism and threats to well-being and loss of lives and livelihoods. It is not acceptable that only some people get freedom of speech and others do not, and that needs to change.
I think our view is that free speech is adequately protected through the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act at the moment. We don't see any need for changes in that regard. In terms of hate speech, I think Rachel referred to the efforts that went in last year. It's a very difficult thing to look at. We opposed the reforms that we're going to go through, and the problem with it is you're handing over the issue of what is hate speech to the courts, with a pretty wide definition. Does changing the speech people have changed the way they think? I don't know. I don't know if government can fix that. What we do have are protections in the law. You can't threaten people with violence. You can't, I can defame someone, but I'll pay for it later. We accept those, but we support the system as it is.
Yeah, this is an area where I'm very willing to listen and learn. I don't know exactly where we sit on free speech and how much it needs to be protected versus how much it needs to be protection around hate speech. I do think we have a conflation in speech with online platforms, that not all online platforms are equivalent of speech, and that everyone should be allowed to have a voice, but that doesn't necessarily give you an entitlement to all of the media attention that you wish and all of the platforms that you wish to be able to do that.
It's New Zealand First policy that we're opposed to the current hate speech reforms. We view them as unnecessary. We've got a wide-ranging set of hate speech laws currently, and free speech for all should be protected as best as government can. There's been the view of organisations like the Free Speech Union that have said that this hate speech laws might be encroaching on that. So, as everyone's mentioned, it is a very complicated issue. And we don't support the current reforms, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a second look at the current legislation.
Right, very good. Now, Keegan, you're first up on this one. You have been elected as the Dunedin MP. On your first Monday in Parliament, the Health Minister tells you that due to increased costs, the Dunedin Hospital budget has to increase by $500 million. Given that, Te Whatuora has to revisit the proposed cuts to the inpatient building. You're being advised as the local MP. What is your response? In other words, it's about the hospital and the hospital.
Well, what I'm kind of picking up there is that we need to, the question is whether to adequately fund the hospital, which Winston has said in his speech down here that we should be doing. But part of the focus there is, I think I read inpatient. We need to cut down the waiting lists. As part of our health policy, we would put forth $925 million every year to remove those long standing wait lists. So well, for starters, I'm not hoping to be in Parliament, so this isn't going to happen for me. But good luck if Rachel wins the seat. Good luck.
Thanks, Keegan. Ben hopes to be in Parliament, so where do you go?
I do.
Not as a local MP, it's a list.
Well, potentially it's an interesting race. So I mean, I would just say fund it, right? Like $500 million is a lot of money. It is also the amount of money that got spent on rat tests that expired. It is a small amount relative to the total government spend. Like, it is an enormous amount of money, but the cost of not funding that is far greater. We've already had cuts that have taken out the cooperative teaching space between the Polytechnic and the university. These cuts, if we cut them now, we will pay for them later. So fund it now or I walk.
We've announced that we will get the hospital finished. I admit I feel slightly imposter here as someone who can't be elected as your MP and isn't even standing in an electorate. One of those, I don't want to use the phrase dirty list only candidates, but I'm not standing in a seat. But let me, just being a complete hypocrite, say this. I think any person elected for a seat has a duty to advocate on behalf of their constituents. $500 million, I'm not sure how I would go at a time of difficult fiscal times advocating for an increase that's that big against my colleague Nicola Willis, but I would give it my best shot. The main thing is we need to get the hospital built. We have to build better infrastructure in this country. We have to stop stuffing around.
I am definitely not going to be a Dunedin MP, but if I were, I would be really strong and clear that, again, this should not even be debated. It should be clear that everyone in Dunedin deserves the best local health and medical services, and absolutely central government should be increasing revenue, including rebalancing wealth, so that we have got enough. We should never entertain any debate which makes us feel like we have to compromise on people's health in this country. Health is an absolute human right, public common good, and again, we just have to really resist and totally reject any arguments of not enough when it comes to the well-being and the livelihood of our communities. That is complete baloney rubbish. So fund it.
So in this hypothetical, we're assuming that it's a Labour government and it's my minister. So I would say to Dr. Beryl, well, you're on record as saying that there's going to be no changes apart from additions. So no. We are building that hospital as we've said we would, and keeping to our track record of building the infrastructure that we say we do.
So when it blew out by 200 million, what I said to the CEO of Te Whatu Ora was, do you not know how to do capital works programs? And that was a serious question, because if you look at Transmission Gully north of Wellington, how much that blew out, well, they didn't turn it into a one-lane road each way because they knew they had to build it to standard. And the fact of the matter was, there wasn't enough contingency money put in there, and the other fact of the matter is, I actually know that that is going to be something we're going to have to deal with in the future. It is going to blow out again one more time before it's built. We have to commit to finishing it. The way you deal with capital works programs like this is you take one that's 4 years out and you move it out to year 6. You don't cut the one you're building down now. And that was the feedback we gave back. It was ignored. That's why the council went to the They Save What We Pay campaign. And I believe that we were the ones who really pushed hard and got the results.
Again, another question. I don't expect everyone to be experts on everything, so, but see how you go. Up to 30 seconds on vaping laws are changing. Do you agree with that? Is it too little, too late? Vaping laws.
Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances you can ever take, and once you're addicted to it, it's very hard to get off it again. The idea that vaping stores were put up as a method to get off cigarettes was a very bad public health call at the time. The course probably has bolted, but we have to understand that in fact this is an incredibly difficult material to get off again, and I think we're probably going to end up having to outlaw them and eventually go back to prescription.
Yes, I want to take us back a step though and say that I'm very proud of our anti-smoking laws, and that they are world leading in terms of taking that generational approach so that kids won't take up smoking. The idea of vaping being an option if you're an adult and you're stopping smoking, that has some use, but certainly I agree that vaping has exploded, and probably in a way that people weren't expecting. So yes, there needs to be a lot more regulation and licensing around that, totally.
Yeah, agree with what has been said. It was supposed to be a way for assisting people to get off tobacco addiction. We've got to get rid of the funky flavours that are appealing to young people. How dare we be putting these near schools and where young people have a lot of access. Prescription, absolutely, and overall a harm minimisation approach. So to make sure that people have got the support they need for getting off addiction, and that's going to require more of our health services to be available as well.
I think we all seem to be in agreement so far. I think there's great concern at the amount of uptake of vaping by young people, but we do have to walk that line of making sure people who are moving off cigarettes at an older age aren't left behind, that vaping can be an option for them. But the numbers are worrying, and the amount of research about the long and medium term harm of vaping is worrying too. So I think we've pretty sure, 99% sure we've committed to having another look at those regulatory settings if we get it.
Yeah, same here. Dr. Nina Sue, our number 4 on the list, has been very strong on the fact that we do need to crack down on vaping. In particular, I think reducing the number of stores that are available and reducing the availability, so it's still there as an option for those who need it, but otherwise trying to get them out of dairies and things like that to reduce that influx. It's also leading to a lot of small petty crime, which is a real shame, because it's an item that people want enough, it's addictive enough that people are willing to resort to crime to get it. So yeah, really finding a way to curb that addiction is absolutely a priority.
I only read about half of our policies related to vaping, and I've memorised even less. But we are for a licensing scheme so that only licensed retailers can sell vaping products. Any organisation or any retailer found to sell vaping products or vaping related products to underage people will go through a 3-strike system. So the first strike, if you're caught, your trade is suspended for 3 months, second strike 6 months, and third strike 5 years. So we'd really crack down on the underage selling, the targeting to children, and keeping them, as I think, I can't remember who it was, but someone mentioned keeping them away from schools, so that's part of our package as well.
Right, thanks Keegan. Now here's probably not a bad one for you to start with. Are unelected places reserved for Māori on elected boards compatible with genuine representative democracy? I'll repeat it. Are unelected places reserved for Māori on elected boards compatible with genuine representative democracy? Up to 45 seconds, because it could be complex, but shorter if you wish. You may have quite a blunt, short answer.
So the party positions, they aren't compatible with genuine representative democracy, because democracy is for the people, by the people, which is direct voting. It's pretty much that simple for us.
I would really question the unelected part of that, because there is a mechanism in some way to have that Māori representation on an elected body. So I don't think that that is compatible, but I also don't think that is what happens. There is a process that is part of that democratic process where you have people pulled in. I think things like Māori seats in Parliament are an example of having a specific place so that you ensure that you have representation that is needed.
I think there's probably 2 issues here. We've said we oppose the 2 seats that have been added to Environment Canterbury by that legislation when Aitahi makes the 2 appointments to them. In terms of Māori wards, where it's on a population proportional basis by councils, which in the past has had a referendum behind it, we're okay with that because it doesn't violate the principle of 1 person, 1 vote. We're more concerned about adding those unelected places to local government, because local government in the end is directly elected. That's what the system is. The public hasn't been asked, and it's been quite a major change.
The only democracy that Aotearoa can truly say is a healthy, flourishing democracy is one that affirms te tiriti o Waitangi. And there has been a really unfortunate narrative that these representative positions are unelected, and that is completely untrue. What I am really inspired by is when we can make sure that we have mana whenua and tangata whenua voices at decision-making tables, we have far more enduring decisions that are made for kaitiaki responsibilities, protecting the environment and the democracy of the community. And the people who are in that privileged position of working with Māori all start to learn and realise how much more robust the decisions are for everyone.
So, as some of the other candidates have said, that there are probably a couple of bits to this question. One is that there are a lot of elected bodies that have Māori who are elected by Māori populations, whether that's Māori seats in Parliament or Māori wards in local government. Different with ECAN, as James said. But then there's also other groups, like we've had the Affordable Waters or the 3 Waters, where there's a board that's made up of councils, who are obviously there's an elected element there, and mana whenua to then appoint people to be directors of entities. So half of those people are elected and some of them are mana whenua representatives. But that is a way of doing New Zealand.
Thanks. Yeah. Jim?
Well, I'm already working on City Council with mana whenua representatives on the 2 big committees, and I found their presence, as Marama has just said, to be illustrative and helpful and for good outcomes. And in fact, as far as I'm concerned, it has worked very, very well. I do want to touch on the regional representation groups, though. I was talking to a member of the board of Te Mata Arawai, who is the regulator for 3 Waters, and I think he was from Tuahoi when he described where he came from. And I said, good luck with finding your 6 representatives on the whole of the East Coast to be the iwi representatives on that representation group. One of the main reasons that people have been upset about that group is, you know, there's 17 councils in the South Island, and there's going to be 6 or 7 spots for us, 6 or 7 spots for the Runanga. There's 18. So I don't think there was actually very Pākehā kind of description.
Thank you. Now next, the climate change question. The DCC has just adopted net carbon zero by 2030. The national plan is 2050. What do you think the Aotearoa New Zealand target ought to be?
Well, it's fairly easy for me to say that one. We actually have funded a target that we believe we can actually hit carbon neutral at 2030, and it's not going to blow the rates out. It's mostly around transport and making the city a livable place, but you also then end up getting your carbon stuff to go with you. I think that the national target should be 2030. You target it. If you don't meet it, you've certainly come a long way down, and you'll certainly hit it by 2035 or 2040. 2050 gives you an opportunity just to wait. And I think that's always the issue when you put a target that far out.
So, well done to the Dunedin City Council and everyone who was involved in making that decision. That's great. And central government has a 2025 target for its own institutions, which is ambitious, to say the least. There's a lot to do. And we've got a climate change manifesto for the first time. Very pleased about that. And very focused on reducing emissions, full stop. Right, we have our budgets and our targets that we have to do through the Climate Zero Act, but also we need to continue the investment to change our systems so that we're not all relying on planting more pine trees. And that's crucially important to the way our ETS works, and it needs to be.
Thank you. Marama.
Oh my goodness. We actually should be having the most ambitious targets that we can get away with, and we should be really clear that there are pathways to bring down our emissions so that we do actually leave our mokopuna with a stable planet. I really acknowledge James Shaw's leadership in taking the strongest action in the past, climate action in the past 6 years rather than in 30 years, but we are going to have to be safe and actually aim for an earlier time to be able to bring our emissions down rather than later. The overshoot is like even a 0.1 of a degree is just far too harmful and dangerous to maintain our lives and livelihoods, and it is lower income communities, disabled people, Indigenous communities that will be harmed the most.
We committed to 2050 into our Zero Carbon Act, the Zero Carbon Act requirements. If we can get there earlier than 2050, great. We're very focused on taking practical measures, and 2 of the policies I've been very pleased we've had in our manifesto are trying to make renewable energy easier to consent with longer term consent so that we can get wind and solar up. The other policy we've announced I'm very keen on is expanding widely across the country electrical vehicle charges, because we know that that's currently an obstacle in their uptake. So we favour those practical measures. We really want to supercharge our universities like Lincoln University. It's working with the ag sector to actually see if we can get some products that we can sell to the rest of the world to help create carbon efficiencies overseas. New Zealand isn't actually in this alone.
Yeah, earlier is better, absolutely, but also I would be loath to set another target that we just failed to meet. I've been a little bit cynical, I guess, but there seems to be promise after promise that governments just don't keep. So what we want to do in a concrete plan to try and get those emissions down is we want to equip the Climate Change Commission to set the carbon price as well as cap the units so that we can actually reduce that. So we can really reduce those emissions. That is a system that works, but we also need to get pine trees out of it, because that enormous planting into the pine trees has been really detrimental to the environment, and is entirely thanks to the Provincial Growth Fund. So it's the kind of thing that we need to make sure, vote for it from Peters, that we really do tackle quickly and as hard and fast as we can on those, but in a way that's sustainable so that we take everybody along with it.
I can't recall if we have a commitment to a specific date, but I do believe we're on board with the 2050 plan. We, like the National Party, agree with practical solutions. There's quite a lot of red tape in how we approach regulation for our primary industries, which is one of our biggest emitters. So if you're kind of over-targeting it and not really looking at the big picture, I think, like Ben suggested, it could lead to another missed target. We want to focus on fit-for-purpose infrastructure that adapts to climate change and allows for carbon emissions reductions, as well as another national trees program, but this one using native trees, not pine trees. And we believe that funding the Defence Force.
Thanks. Now, I've got a small section now where I start with a specific question to one of the candidates. They can answer briefly or up to 45 seconds, and then there will be an invitation to any of the other candidates who wish to comment briefly, up to 30 maximum. So we're going to ask Rachel Brooking first. Have you given up on a wealth tax?
Very clearly, not in our manifesto, or it is clear that it's in our manifesto that we're not having a wealth tax under Labour in this term of government.
Well, jump in. We are very clear that no politician can remove the power of your vote, and that if people like a wealth tax, and we know that for every political party they do, if people want the wealthier to be paying their fair share, then they can vote for it, and that will give us the opportunity and the influence to be able to get that across the line.
Well, I mean, I think that answer illustrates why I personally probably aren't surprised when we party voting national. And I'd encourage you to do the same too. We will not have a wealth tax under any circumstances. We think a wealth tax would be an absolute disaster for this country. We think it would drive investment, drive wealth out of the country. We need as much wealth in the country as possible. Completely opposed to the idea.
A land value tax cannot be taken out of the country because it's based on the value of the land. The Opportunities Party is suggesting a land value tax instead of a wealth tax. It's a very practical way of going about it. And I'm curious, Rachel, has a land value tax specifically been ruled out?
All those sorts of new taxes have been rolled out.
I just want to add on that all the other countries have got all the other types of taxes, so I don't know where our wealthy are going to go to without any other taxes.
Jim's turn now.
Listen, I think that the government's not bringing in enough tax to run itself properly, and we've had far too much accumulation of wealth at the top, and it is not behaving in a healthy manner in our economy. It's showing up in the form of expensive houses that young people cannot get into, showing up all over the place as a bad thing. So I think we need to I want to bring in with the 2033 movement a whole new set of taxes, considering basically wealth distribution, and I wouldn't take wealth tax off the table.
Yeah, next to Marama. Are the Greens pro-science when it suits on the likes of climate change and anti-science on other occasions as with GM and GM food?
In actual fact, we've been very clear that we need to continue the science with GM and GE foods, including more work in the labs to actually empower that science. So yeah, we want to make sure that we have got robust science behind any proposals. I'm also aware that within the party that's a strong, robust conversation, and long may that last. That's a good thing.
Kia ora, Dr. Ben Peters here, PhD in biochemistry, working in those labs. We have absolutely been held back by pretty much actually every party up here has had an opportunity to look at those regulations and turn them over, and they haven't. They are thoroughly out of date. Most other countries are moving forward, looking especially at gene editing, which is a very moderate approach to go with. Things in the Green Manifesto that, at least up till very recently, have been zero GM vaccine releases, things that are genuinely great. And I hate to break it to you, but the COVID vaccine was absolutely modified.
Thanks, Ben.
Saved lives.
Thanks, Ben.
New Zealand First position is proceed with caution because every case is different. It should be a case-by-case basis. We're in favour of gene editing for things like ryegrasses. We would reduce our carbon emissions, but Marama might want to have a chat with some of our candidates because the other week Fran actually agreed with me and echoed that exact point, which is very different to what she said today.
No, we'll just go to Jim now. We'll let, I'm sure you disagree. I'm sure you think his view is correct.
Well, I'm a scientist too, and have used gene modification in the lab, and I think in the lab it's a relatively safe place to do it. I'm very cautious of when it gets out into the wild, especially grasses and brassicas, brassicas, because it's already been known that gene drift occurs there. And once you've done that, you won't be able to control the gene drift into the environment. We need to be very cautious about that. But in the laboratory, gene editing for dealing with congenital diseases, other such things, makes perfect sense, and it really isn't going to get out into the rest of the
Now, the next one is...
Can I quickly comment on that?
Oh, you haven't commented yet.
There is a review at the moment that's being consulted on in terms of what can be done in the lab, which goes to one of the points. And my second point would be on it is we've got to be really careful that we're not just talking about GE as if it's some magic bullet that's going to solve climate change for us and mean that we don't reduce our gross emissions, which we totally need to do.
Now to James. James, this one. Can we really afford tax cuts at this time?
Well, believe it or not, my answer is yes, we can afford the very limited, highly targeted tax cuts that we are proposing. They are highly targeted. As you will see, they will provide up to $250. The fact is this. We've had 6 years of the highest inflation we have had for ages. I've been door knocking with my colleagues through this country. People were struggling to pay at supermarkets. People were struggling to meet the cost of living. And I simply don't accept that the government can take more money every year for worse outcomes. We believe that people can keep more of their own money. They know how to spend it better. It's a pretty fundamental National Party tenet. And we've designed these that they are targeted at families, targeted at people who need them, and that we want to get money back in the pocket.
Thank you. Others to comment? Marama.
So targeted that only a few people will ever get any sort of money from National's tax cuts. When the Greens have a clear plan for those very people who are struggling will actually get more money. They're not the ones you want to give heaps of the cuts to. National wants to give far more money to the wealthy. They are still upholding the long defunct trickle-down theory of economics, hoping that keeping the wealth up there will trickle it down to people. That hasn't worked for 50 years, and that's why only with the Greens party vote will we properly rebalance the target.
Thank you. Next.
Absolutely, we can afford tax cuts if we offset it one to one for another. So land value tax generates income, land can't be moved, it's already rated, so it's very easy to implement. We can then use that to offset and put in a tax-free threshold. We'll set out at 15,000 and adjust those tax brackets because that tax bracket creep has really, really come in hard.
The short answer is no, and we're facing a change of government that will be led by likely the National Party, if you believe the polls. National and ACT both want tax cuts. We've said that we'll be the grown-ups in the room and put a stop to that, so take out some insurance and bloody vote New Zealand first.
Yeah, what New Zealand can't afford is all the things that those tax cuts will end up cutting. So that will be the public services that we have. 6.5% off the Department of Conservation. That's huge, and we've done brilliant work there. And we've got much more to do, and you can run through a whole lot of departments about that. And their figures don't add up, and the effective cut to beneficiaries from it in terms of how you index inflation for that is just appalling.
I think what we're seeing is a lot of playing around the edges of an underfunded policy system. And, so we're going to give these people this small tax break over here, but the fact is, and I follow again with Marama again, 40 years ago, Fourth Labor government brought in those major changes and started bringing towards us laissez-faire economics and trickle-down theory, and 40 years later, this is what we've got. So why would we go any further into that intellectual, for want of another word, argument?
Right. Now, the last question before our break. We can go up to 45 if necessary. Is removing GST from fresh and frozen fruit and vegetables a good policy?
It has almost no impact, so why?
Yes, it does. And as a Labour Party person, for many years I've had people say to me, why do we, when so much of the rest of the world doesn't, pay GST on fruit and vegetables? Surely we want to encourage people to buy those fruit and vegetables as healthy food, nutritious food, and this is an incentive to do that.
Super complex to try and adjust it just off some food and not others, and it'd probably only save your shop, I don't know, $7 to $15 at the very most, when instead we can actually end poverty and put the money straight into people's pockets, and then they can shop how they wish, while at the same time regulate supermarkets, for crying out loud.
Well, they were a Labour Party friend of mine, they might be Green now actually, but who shop at a dreadful supermarket in Auckland called Farrow, told me that black truffles are currently $4,000 a kilogram. They'll get $600 off selling to restaurants. I think this is absolutely useless tax policy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't support GST off fruit and vegetables for a couple of reasons. One, it complicates the tax system enormously. There are much more effective ways of giving money back to people, and I think the tax-free threshold is a really, really effective way of doing that. I also think it adds a lot of confusion as to what counts as a fruit or a vegetable. Side note, are mushrooms a fruit or a vegetable? Love to hear about that one. But also, tinned fruit, things like that. We start making a real moral judgment call around what is good food and what is bad food, and we're not actually going to let people just make their own decisions and equip them appropriately.
Our policy is to have a select committee inquiry into it if it ends up being a government priority after the fact. But it's not a priority for us. It doesn't seem to stack up economically, and we're much more focused on busting up the supermarket duopoly with a strong grocery commissioner, not what we've got now. We'd rather tackle the duopoly than focus on debating what's a fruit or not.
Thank you very much. Now, plenty of food for thought there, don't you think? And on that note, we'll be back in 10 minutes sharp. This is our half-time break, so to speak. So see you in 10 minutes for our speed dating questions. resume. Next up is a short section called Speed Dating Question. Perhaps could also call it Playing Favourites. You'll see why shortly. One of the questions is about asking your favourite politician from another party. They must choose a party from another side of the political spectrum. In other words, from National Act, they need to choose someone from the Greens, Te Pāti Māori or Labour, and Marama and Rachel have to choose someone from ACT or National. Hobson's choice, is that what it is? And then Keegan can choose anyone from here. I'll go down in the seat and I'll call them up by lots and we'll see how we go. So, first up, Ben Peters. Right, Ben, your favourite book?
I'm going to Red Wall. It's a childhood favourite of mine.
And your favourite movie?
The Lord of the Rings.
And you don't look like a hobbit.
I was just too short to apply for enough.
If you had a week free to study anything you like, what would it be?
To be honest, I think geography. I'm very bad at knowing where different places are, and I'd love to do that.
Now, your favourite politician?
You did. Am I like James Shaw?
No. National Act.
National Act. Oh, we're the centrist party. Oh, that's really hard.
What about James?
What about James? Oh, I think just James is really, he has that pragmatic approach to climate change that I really appreciate. And so I think that works well.
And your favourite place overseas for a holiday?
I have done very little travel, but I would say I've really enjoyed my time in Korea.
Right. I'm just wondering if someone's going to say Hawaii. If you're a wild animal, what would it be?
I think I would be a weka because they're very inquisitive.
Wiggers also cause a lot of trouble, don't they?
Give me one turn, come on.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Next up is Keegan. You're the man with all the choices. The kingmaker. You can choose whoever you like. Now, your favourite book?
The Gone series by Michael Woodhouse.
Okay, and your favourite movie?
Any of the Star Wars films, I can't pick one.
Right. And if you had a week to study anything you like?
The Dutch language, because my grandparents are Dutch and immigrated here 60 years ago-ish, so I'd love to learn a bit more there.
And your favourite politician from another party?
Can I be cheeky and pick one from Labour and one from National?
Sure.
Penny Simmons, because she's from my hometown and she did an amazing job with SIT. And then Rachel from Labour, because she's a really lovely person and I've really enjoyed her.
He's as charming as Winston. Where's the smile? Can you do the smile?
I can't pull off his smile.
And favourite place for an overseas holiday?
I've only ever been overseas to Australia, and I've only been to Brisbane or Gold Coast, but I'd have to pick Brisbane, because that's where my family are.
Yeah. Amsterdam or Rotterdam or something. Yeah. And if you're a wild animal, what would you be?
I feel like I'd be a Kia, because they're kind of chaotic, and I can get like that after a few drinks.
And you've got a sharp beak.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. We've got Jim. Jim's done something like this before as a DCC candidate, so he's got a bit of an advantage, hasn't he? A little bit. Favourite book?
Actually, my favourite political book is a book called On Bullshit And it's actually I can say it's truly my favourite because I pull it out a lot to show people. It's an exploration of the difference between a bullshitter and a liar. And it was published by the author. He was an emeritus professor at Princeton when George Bush Jr. got in, and he felt it needed commentary on the political system at the time.
Speaking of that, I nearly went to go with our rock solid. I was going to bring in a shovel and put it by the wall. Your favourite movie?
Hunt for the Bullet People.
Going bush, and a free week to study anything you'd like?
It'd be something in history, I think, 'cause that's my other passion.
Like living in the past.
I like to learn the lessons from the past.
I'm actually a history graduate, sorry. Now, favourite politician? No, you wouldn't use two.
I'm
you
left
need
of
to be on
Labour,
the
so
right.
I'm on
You
the
need to
left.
be on the right.
I am from the left,
Yeah,
yes.
so you need to be ACT or national.
Can I do New Zealand first?
Yeah.
Mark Patterson, when he was New Zealand's first politician for this area, I had a lot of respect for how he interacted with us.
And favourite place for an overseas holiday?
New York, I got family there, so it's a combo of the two.
And yes, do you want GST off Big Apples?
I'll be big hit.
And if you're a wild animal, what would you do?
Kiruru, I got to taste the plums and flying crazily.
And you like to be black? Now, Rachel's next. Yeah. And book?
The Axeman's Carnival by Catherine Chidgey. I read it over summer and it's set in Otago and it has a talking magpie and it's brilliant.
And your favourite movie?
I think Boy, also going up with the Taika Waititi. It's set, it's got lots of cultural references that are appropriate for someone of my age, and it's beautiful and funny and also goes to the importance of looking after community.
Boy, oh boy. If you had a free week to study anything, what would it be?
Te reo Māori. I've tried a few times and I mangle it all the time, but I have throughout my life done some, so it'd be good to do more.
Ka pai. Now, what is your favourite overseas place for a holiday?
Somewhere where I've got friends or family. We lived in the UK for a couple of years when my husband was doing his medical training, and we were able to go to Italy with our Italians who lived above us in our flats to their home, and that was brilliant.
And a wild animal?
I'm wearing my Pika Pika earrings, which are made in Dunedin, so it's the bat, and mainly just because I think they're awesome.
I can't resist a crack about being batted, can I?
No, you can't. I'll take it.
Right, who have we got left? The politician.
So we had these questions before, and I was all ready to talk about the wonderful Eugenie Sage, but you say I have to
It's
go.
going to be on the right.
So in that case, Chris Pink, spent quite a bit of time with him on Regulations Review Committee, which I know sounds really exciting, but it's very important, and reviewed all the COVID orders, for instance, so good committee to be on, but because he does more dad jokes than my husband does.
Marama. And your favourite book?
Everyone should try and find Owe by Becky Manawatu. It won the Oscars, and it was her first debut novel. It's another commentary on overcoming the impacts of colonisation and overcoming trauma with aroha.
For crying out loud.
Owe.
Now, your favourite movie?
My father got his first got an acting award for Insatiable Moon, which was produced by Mike Riddell, so Aotearoa film. Yeah, Mike Riddell is based on Mike Riddell's novel, and it's really a movie about how important it is to know about discrimination for people with mental health and why they deserve support and dignity.
But you're not a movie.
I'm not a moonie.
No, that's the worst of the night. Never mind. We're going to move on very fast. Your favourite week to study?
Oh, I had Te Reo Māori too, but since that's taken then, I'll pick up our other official language, New Zealand Sign Language.
And your favourite place overseas for holiday?
I've never ever holidayed overseas, so I'm going to count my C as Waitemata and up in Hokianga, where I'm from.
And if you're a if you're a wild animal, what would you do?
My name is Marama. I have always adored being in the night, so Ruru, our owl.
Well, with the moon, you're
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a hoot.
You're good. So good.
And favourite, that's it.
No, you forgot my politician.
The politician. Dear. I think I better retire.
No, because seriously,
I'm
Chester
right.
Burrows started to do some transformational work in addressing the drivers of crime, and as a faithful National Party leader and with his background in police, he came to the enlightened understanding that we needed to move away from just punitive responses and address the issues behind generations of offending and crime.
Thank you very much. Lucky last, James. Favourite book?
My favourite book is Michael Bassett's book about New Zealand Prime Ministers, where every Prime Minister has about 10 pages and he doesn't pull any punches. Including about my own party.
And your favourite movie?
My favourite movie is All the President's Men, about Woodward and Bernstein bringing down Nixon, but I don't want you to read too much into that.
And if you had a free week to study, what would it be?
I think I'd probably study something quite nerdy. I've always wanted to learn ancient Greek. I know it's completely pointless. I've vaguely got my head around Te Reo Māori now, so if I had a chance to do that, I'd have a go.
And your favourite place overseas for a holiday?
The favourite place I've been to is I went to Niue with my old boss, Bill and Mish, and we were very, very hospitably hosted by Jacinda Ardern's parents, who were at the time High Commissioner. We had a great time, and they grow a lot of organic vanilla there, which is one of my favourite things in the world. It's a great place to go, and they need our support.
Not a vanilla answer. That deserves a groan from Steve, doesn't it? Now, from our wild animal, the stag, what would yours be?
Well, I was about to say owl, and I'm going to stick with it just in case you can make another owl joke.
There's enough owls in the world.
Owl! Owl, that's an awful joke. Owl, that's an awful answer. No, that's even worse.
Well,
never mind, thank you, James.
My favourite.
I must hate them all, I don't want them to answer.
My favourite politician from another party is Tariana Turia, because she is the example for me of someone in politics who stood absolutely by her principles, and she's the example for me of what Dumbledore says in Harry Potter, that it's hard to stand up to your enemies, but it's much harder to stand up to your friends, and I just hope if I'm ever in the same position, I can be as brave as she was.
Just shift the chairs back, and next up are some, I know many of you are waiting eagerly for this part. We'll see how we get on. Questions from the floor. I must repeat and emphasise any statements very, very short. If they go on a bit, I'll just cut it off and we'll go on to the next. So you have been warned. Questions from the floor. So where do we start? Yes, down the back.
Jim O'Malley, I've been really impressed by how you presented. I didn't know you existed before tonight. I'm a little bit worried about a vote for you that you're not in the political party. How effective can you be in Parliament on your own?
So how effective can Jim O'Malley be without a party in Parliament on his own?
Well, there's still the issue of your voice and what you can do with your voice, and I would say that as a humble city councillor, you found me on the national news enough times when there's been issues that have made Dunedin, that have been important for Dunedin, and I've managed to find the voice and get it through. Going to Parliament would be doing the same thing, finding that space. But also, I want to, if you can go to my website, 2033.co.nz, I want you to go and look at the 2033 movement. It's my intention to go there and form a new left of centre party. So going to Wellington for this cycle will be to represent Dunedin, but also to be the first person in to bring this new movement in.
Thanks. Now that's a very good point. You can ask questions of one or two or three or all candidates. Yes.
Will you cap health expenditure increases at the rate of inflation, as Hudson said? Will you allow health expenditure to increase to cover health inflation, expectation, workforce and demographics? You will allow to increase beyond inflation to deal with our needs.
Right. Will you increase health spending above inflation, basically? So, who wants to start? Yeah, all of you.
Absolutely. I mean, my whole point is that there's not enough money going into government in the first place because of effectively adopting trickle-down theory as an economic model. If we go back to the models that we had where we actually shared our wealth and used the correct agent for delivery of good health, which is the government, then it would be funded properly and it would be able to anticipate what's coming. A really good example, the waiting time for a knee surgery is so long that you end up developing a comorbidity in the other knee before you get to hospital. So if we were to actually just put people through at the right time, we'd get rid of half of our problems.
Now, Rachel, we'll keep this on moving at 30 seconds maximum, just so we can keep the questions up.
Yes.
That was really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Core public common good, but also alongside ending homelessness and making sure homes are healthy with a comprehensive warrant of fitness. That alone would diminish a lot of the later health implications that end up because we, oh my goodness, should make sure that every house doesn't make people sick.
We've pledged to increase health funding, we haven't pledged to increase it by above inflation, and I won't announce that tonight because it'll be a very fast end to my career. But what I can say is that we are also focused on those drivers of health. We're going to have a heavy focus on our social investment approach about addressing some of these drivers of health outcomes before they actually get to the hospitals.
I mean, I can't commit to the exact number we'd increase. We want to work collaboratively with anyone who does, but again, just to follow on from Mona, absolutely we need to look at the drivers of what gives us good health. So partly we need to really address the inequality in this country, and that really does stem from housing. So we need to increase the density of housing in cities to make sure those houses are high quality. We also need to have a really innovative society, so we need to look at our regulation settings around new technologies, particularly genetic technologies, which are rapidly improving people's health around the world, and we're like right at the cusp of a lot of that stuff hitting our shores. And so having an area where you get a sense of
Thank you, Ben.
We don't have a specific policy that says we'd go above inflation indexing, but we have committed to wide-ranging funding of the health sector, including replacing Pharmac and doubling the medicines budgets from the current 1.2 billion to about 2.5 billion, and eliminating wait lists with just under $1 billion per year to address that, so people can get surgeries now. We want to increase cancer screenings. There's a few different types in there. There's a few more things that I can't remember right now, but...
Thank you, Keegan. Now, questions, Julie, the people at the back in the lounge is full, and we've had to turn some people away, but we want to give them a chance for a couple of questions. So I'll ask the next question. If someone's got a question from the lounge, they come to the door. So next question at the back there. Yes.
Should the CEO of Pharmac be dismissed?
Right, should the CEO of Pharmac be dismissed, Keegan?
Well, we're going to dismiss Pharmac entirely and replace it with something that's patient-focused and actually gets medicines to New Zealanders who need it. Whether or not an individual's job should be on the line isn't really something that politicians should comment on, but we'll change the entire model.
Pharmac has delivered incredible results for New Zealand for a very long time. I would be loath, I know there are issues, but by and large, it is the one reason why we are able to afford the range of medicines that we are. Yes, it would be good to increase that funding. Yes, it would be good to increase the scope of medicines, but we shouldn't have political parties picking which medicine should get funded in an election year and then forgetting for number 3.
I think this was a question of the current CEO of Farmec, who's in some trouble at the moment. I suppose, I mean, I only speak personally on this. I think the emails and everything that got released, she was certainly unwise in the way that she had communicated about people. I'm always reluctant to jump in to say someone should be sacked for making a mistake. You know, I think second chances are a thing.
What is important is that we protect an independent and far better funded organisation, whether that's Farmec or not, but at the moment it's Farmec, and that politicians shouldn't meddle in the decisions. That independence is important for a reason. It ensures that a government is not beholden to lobbying, for example, from any specific pusher of particular medications. So it's really important we keep that independent, but mostly important that we increase the overall funding for Farmec to make sure that people are getting what they need.
I agree with the importance of Farmec and as a method for buying drugs. It seems to be working really well for us generally. It's not perfect. Everything, you know, we need to make sure that we know why Farmec's making decisions that it does and doesn't on various different drugs, what evidence they're looking at. And Labour has committed to increasing its funding by $1 billion over the next 4 years, and agreed with what the others have said about the being free from political interference. That's really super important. On the specific question of the CEO at the moment, those decisions are for Peter Hughes, the Public Services Commissioner.
Yeah, I'm not going to particularly quote specifically to the CEO, but I worked for Pfizer for 10 years in drug discovery, and when we were going into the commercialisation of that drug, there were 2 countries that Pfizer, it was always mentioned, Canada and New Zealand, because they were the only 2 national bulk buyers, and they were keeping their prices down dramatically lower than anybody else. I feel that maybe Farmec's focus needs to change a little bit away from minimisation of costs to basically appropriate investment, but I'd be very aware of the snake oil salesman selling you a cancer drug. Cancer drugs are pay me or die. The money in behind some of those is so immoral that the price of that drug is not moral. And I am seeing those people lobbying around.
Thank you. That was it. Question from the back there. I will have another one from here. Yes, Richard.
There's somebody down here.
Oh, there is someone down there. So we'll take that person, then Richard.
I'd like to ask Nashla why you say you'll pay for your promises by growing the economy, and you want to promote a housing market by selling houses when it's non-productive and no one pays tax.
Mark, did you hear that, James?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
I think if I'm not sure those 2 things are necessarily, from our perspective, inconsistent. I mean, one thing I've learned from being with my fellow candidates here is that we don't all view housing as ideally a market. I think in reality, housing is a market and will continue to be a market and will continue to play its role. The economy, if there's all supply out, then I don't see why housing can't contribute to growth as any other area of the economy. But supply is obviously a significant issue at the moment.
Oh no, housing has to be a human right and definitely a common public good. For far too long, for decades and generations, housing has been used primarily to grow the wealth of a few with the exploitation of people who have no other choice, and that has to change, and we've got to shift back to housing as a core human right.
On housing, we need to build more kainga ora homes, and we've done that with 13,000 and working towards 27,000 by 2027. It's really important that people have these stable homes that Marama was just talking about. But I think the question might be on the foreign owners being able to purchase houses over $2 million, which will of course increase house prices to $2 million, and that's something that Labour did to stop some of that international overseas purchases to stop all of the crazy inflation that was happening in that market. And our neighbours in Queenstown, the average prices of houses there at the moment, I think it's the average price, is $1.7 million. So you know that all those houses will be $2 million in the blink of an eye, and that's going to be horrible for our friends in Queenstown who already struggle to get homes.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to look at the housing market as not the single best investment. It has been for a very long time, and it has been probably most people in this room's retirement plan. What we need to do is shift away our investment into housing. So we need to clear the short list of the wait list, for public housing, and so TOP wants to commit $3 billion to that, to community-based housing providers, as they have built more houses than the government has. The second thing we also need to do is bring in a 100% deposit requirement for investors, so that if you're investing in a house, you have to put up 100% of the deposit. You can't just daisy chain home after home after home, which has been a massive vehicle for inflation and speculation in that market. So we need to cool that market, and we need to give people a good place to put their money so we have a productive economy, and that means investing in productive New Zealand businesses. Thank you.
Going back to the kind of basis of the original question around the funding of nationals tax cuts through the foreign buyers tax on property over $2 million, most economists said it won't stack up, so what's the point in opening that can of worms? We're just going to worsen the housing market. New Zealand First would ensure that ban that we worked with Labour on, would ensure that stays in place. Kiwi homes are for Kiwis. If my generation ever wants to own a house, we need to keep New Zealand housing market to New Zealanders first, and then if the crisis disappears, which it won't, then maybe we can look at opening up. But it's ridiculous if you're sitting here when people can't buy houses to say that we should sell them to wealthy foreigners.
Kind of move on to another question, so we got our next one, but everybody spoke. So housing is alright, let's have to start from that perspective, and we've been using it as an investment tool now for far too long, and it's now got out of control. Why would you put anything back in there to fuel that fire again when we've really got to bring it under control and dampen it down? And the other aspect is, I think the first part of that question was how are you planning on doing this if you're just cutting taxes, and are you going to get the economy going? And I think we've gone through this for far too long. You don't cut taxes and get a reward at the other end. You end up getting, if anything, a stagnant economy. So you end up with no taxes and no economic growth either, and then houses go like this.
Okay, now, yes, Richard.
So, kia ora koutou. Smoke-free enforcement officers are now going to be enforcement officers for vape places as well. Currently we have 4 designated full-time equivalents for the entire country. What are you going to do to reinforce the workforce down here that protects our rangatahi from becoming tobacco and vape companies' customers, especially down here, but actually in the entire South Island, because I think we'll be neglected?
Yeah, thank you, Bridget. Did you catch the question? There's very few, there's 4 enforcement officers for
4 full-time equivalent smoke-free enforcement officers. They now do the vape-free stuff as well, so that's going to shops and making sure they're not selling to underage people. And it's for enforcing the legislation. We have amazing legislation in place, but we don't have enough people able to do the job of actually enforcing.
So would you beef up the enforcement on vaping and smoking, breaking the laws?
There's absolutely no point in a law if you don't have enforcement to go with it. So that's the first part of it. So you've only got 4 nationally, you clearly don't have enough. The other one is that when we did this with Cozy Homes and we had housing inspectors come in, we didn't get any in Dunedin, and they were all in Christchurch. And so, again, the Lower South Island just does not get its even population-based share, let alone its regional importance share. So, yes, we need more, and we definitely have to make sure that they are spread around the country, otherwise only part of the country is getting enforcement.
Right, Rachel.
Agree with the sentiment that all legislation that requires enforcement needs to have people there to do the enforcing, totally. And that's something, an area I know a lot more about is in the resource management sphere, and we've had real problems with an absence of enforcement. So I've tried to change the system to make it more enforcement focused, and obviously we need more enforcement with the vapes too.
Yeah, just hearing from you directly about the legislation being good, but not having enough enforcement makes it really clear that it's just a waste of time and a waste of work if we've got good legislation without enforcement. What I think I've seen in other enforcement areas is that when it's left to local regions and local councils, that's why central government absolutely has to have a role in making sure local councils and enforcement agencies can do the work that they need to do for those regions.
I probably can't say anything new here, other than what Rachel said on the rule of law issue. If Parliament's passing this law, and if it's working well, if it's a good law, as you say, and it's got enforcement provision in it, and there's not enough enforcement officers, then the rule of law is being harmed. So if Parliament's going to pass laws that have an enforcement function in there, then they need to have an appropriation behind them, and that's certainly something I'll take back to my side.
And at the core of that also, it feels like it's the South Island that's being left behind. Part of the Opportunities Party, we're running a real South Island pitch, with Raph, our leader, being in Ireland, in Christchurch, if you're not aware, and myself, third, being down here in Dunedin. So if you party vote top, and if we get in, that's 2 MPs from the South Island, including the leader and number 3 on the list, that could be a strong champion for this island, and for especially this far south, ensuring that we are adequately resourced.
I would echo the sentiment that the others said, that if there's legislation that requires enforcement, we should enforce it. We don't have a specific policy about beefing up that enforcement agency as of yet, but it's definitely something I'm willing to take back to the leader and the rest of the policy team. In terms of on principle, we would definitely be for that. We've got another policy that's not quite relevant, but it points to our intentions. We want to fund and boost Māori and Pacifica wardens as well as Neighbourhood Watch. So it's kind of, on principle, it's the same kind of thing. I would imagine that we would be pro beefing up the enforcement.
Now, have we another question from the lounge? Yeah? No, that's all right. There's plenty out here, so it's not a problem. Yes, yes.
Yeah, Terrace Airport and a comment on New Zealand tourism in general.
Terrace Airport and a comment on New Zealand tourism in general. Answers, away you go, Keegan. Terrace Airport, what do you think?
I don't know what that airport is, I'm sorry.
No, the proposed Terrace Airport.
Yeah,
okay, fine.
Not sure, but we have a very lovely tourism industry operator as one of our candidates who's advocated for some really good tourism policy that's in our manifesto. I haven't got to that section yet because it's alphabetical order and I'm a slow reader. I would suggest having a look on the New Zealand First website, nzfirst.nz, and our tourism policy. It'll be much better than anything I can cobble together right now.
Yeah, starting on tourism, that's an industry that got really massively hit with COVID, and it's been a slow rebound. I think we're at risk of losing that lovely clean green image that we have of New Zealand and being a wonderful destination to come to unless we have some really strong action on climate rapidly. And also in particular, our cities aren't feeling safe, and that's a really important sentiment, even if it is statistically still going pretty well. So it's important that we have that sense of community, that sense of feeling safe, and that we can uphold those values of what it feels like to be a Kiwi, where everyone's pretty chill, a little bit low-key, and just okay. And so I think promoting that and hoping that we can have a bit more tourism would be good. I think things like the Key in New York, which was $130,000 and had like 100 people push it, are a large waste of money in terms of trying to get tourism numbers back into New Zealand.
Thank you, James. Now,
completely endorsed that a number of our small businesses, especially in the regions, obviously did it really hard during COVID and are struggling to get back on their feet. And you meet these people when you're out and about, and you know things are recovering, but they're recovering slowly. I worry a little bit. Ben mentioned the clean green image. Certainly, I think that's an issue. I worry a bit about some of the coverage we're getting overseas on the crime that's happening at the moment in our cities. I remember after the Christchurch earthquakes, we used to get a lot of coverage in the overseas newspapers that you'd think that the entire city had been destroyed by the earthquake, which it had, but it looked like it had been levelled. There's a lot of reporting about what's happening with crime in New Zealand and some of the other social indicators, and it worries me a lot in terms of making us a good tourist destination. On Terrace, I I'm not aware of my party's at this point. I should go through the consenting process.
Thanks, Marama.
I'm wary of tariffs, want to uphold local decision making, especially for the people of Wanaka. I'm wary of anything that is being suggested as a way to lower emissions. I'm wary of greenwashing, and that is a line that often gets pushed when it has little to do with trying to be more sustainable to our environment and to our climate. Tourism will never ever and should never ever look like what it has looked like for the past 50 years. We cannot sustain that level of assault on our living systems. We cannot sustain around the world that level of air travel. But that's okay. That means that we have to all think together about what the higher value experiences are that only Aotearoa can offer. And you've absolutely got examples of that with our more local industries and businesses, and that's where we should be putting more government.
Thank you, Marama. On to Rachel.
Thanks. On tourism, Marama's right in terms of, and this comes through very strongly in Queenstown as well, that we don't want to be where we were in 2019. However, tourism is an important part of our economy, so how do we do it more sustainably with people coming here for longer and really giving of themselves to New Zealand and getting some really great experiences back. So we've got an industry transformation plan for that, and certainly all of our manifesto commitments are around doing that sustainable tourism. In terms of, and you know, there's wonderful things today. I biked around from Portobello to Port Chalmers and then took the ferry back across, and that ferry wouldn't really be operating if it wasn't for that cycle path, which has been a great benefit for here. On tariffs, I find it really confusing that Christchurch Airport wants to do something in another part of the country and what that will do to Christchurch's airport itself in terms of international visitors, and I have not yet been convinced that there's a need for wide-body jets in that part of the world.
Well, in many respects, tariffs is coming from the model that airports should compete with each other instead of cooperate with each other. And I sit on the Regional Transport Committee for Otago Southland as Dunedin's rep, and we have been trying to work with Queenstown, Dunedin and Invercargill to actually act in a cooperative manner. There's really no need for tariffs, to be honest, but it probably could happen because of the power of Christchurch Airport and the ability of them to redirect planes to the new airport. Auckland owns a big chunk of Queenstown, which is one of the reasons that so many planes go into Queenstown. So I don't think tariffs should happen. I think it would be a bad decision. I think your question was around the environmental impact of tourism. Was that where you were going?
Well, but both for tariffs and tourism, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can't. There's no way you can say tourism doesn't have an impact where it hits. And you know, one of the things, if you want to get my opinion on the effect of tourism, go and look at an ODT article where I had a go at Stuart Nash over freedom camping rules. You know, the wealthy tourist, and that ended up pushing the New Zealander out to now $1,000 fines brought to you by Stuart Nash and the Labour Party only in the last 3 years. And so tourism is a double-edged sword, and if we just look at the money and we don't look at the damage, then we're ignoring the other part of it, which is something we really have to pay more attention to.
Right. We're running out of time, so we've got to keep flying. Yes, Abby.
Kia ora. I wanted to say thank you for putting your hands up and being willing to be vulnerable by campaigning. How can we make it possible for people to be political candidates and also be safe?
Right. You don't have to answer.
Just thanks for that, Abby. Nice to see you again. I think the fact of the matter is, if you're going to put yourself out into the space, you do have to accept a certain amount of exposure. But on the other side of that, it's completely unacceptable to get violent and threatening with anybody who's sitting here, because people are here on the stage for whatever reason. They're here, that 90% of them at least, are here for their community. And I think you've got to recognise that, even if you don't agree with their view.
I'm really lucky to be campaigning here in Dunedin. All the audiences that we've had so far have been remarkably polite and lovely, just as you are tonight. incredibly polite scenes at the university. I think I would have been a bit bolshier when I was there. But it's really important that we don't accept anything that isn't robust debate, that goes beyond that. And in February in 2021, we had the protest on the lawn of Parliament, and there were nooses saying that they were out for all of the politicians. And for me, that crosses the line, and we need to be able to call that out and stop that from happening. But also, you can all do that by, when you see people saying horrible things on Facebook or whatever the medium is, to say, no, that's not okay, stick to the argument. And we know that horrible things have been happening to other candidates. And
Thank you, Rachel.
Community connection and collective responsibility and care are the ways that we make sure that people aren't vulnerable to being manipulated by powerful forces that promote racism and bigotry and hate. And so making sure we support our teachers and social workers and youth workers, for example, who are doing that gluing work is something that we can all do. We cannot deny that we have got a deep racist stain under this country, which has unfortunately led to disproportionate threats on also women and women of colour and towards Māori and Pacific and brown people in politics. And I do want to be really clear and unequivocal that we need to call out political leaders who incite and build up that dog whistling and hate towards particular groups of people.
Thanks for the question. I'm a first-time candidate, and it's been quite the experience. It's been a very good experience, and the robust debate is certainly good. If you don't have a thick skin already, or if you have a thick skin, you have a thicker skin by the time you get your first debate, like my Union's Otago one last week. But I think one thing that worries me a lot is, especially seeing it online, is the dehumanisation of other people. And there's that real tribal view out there sometimes that because someone's on the other side, they're bad, and I really hate that influence in our politics. I'm not actually quite sure what we can do to combat it other than each ourselves call it out. And as much as I try to avoid the comments on Facebook or other things like that, that seems to me to be getting worse. And I don't know whether it's on us to all start commenting ourselves. Maybe that's the first step, or just to name and shame some of these people who hide behind these fake names and nicknames and say the most horrendous things. I don't know if it's an easy answer, but maybe that's what we need to do.
I agree with the sentiment of everything that's come before me. And in addition, I think there's some really pragmatic things we can do. Number one is around promoter statements. So as a candidate, you're required to, on any promotion materials, anytime I say vote top, or top is fantastic, or top is great, I have to put in a, sorry, if you keep going. You have to put in a legal statement saying that this was authorised by, and you have to, big parties, or parties that are established, can use their secretary and they can use a party address, but smaller candidates or independents have to put a physical address where they can be contacted, and I think that is, in this day and age of email, of websites, is completely superfluous. There is no need to tell the entire world or this entire room where my home address is, particularly as I don't actually live alone, so it's not just my address, it's my mother and father-in-law's address, it's my aunt's address, it's my children's address. So removing that legal requirement would be a massive move towards allowing candidates independence and being able to just promote what they have. They may need to put in an email address.
Thank you, Ben. Keegan now.
I will just echo what Ben said about promoter statements. That's a thing that gets raised at the or the electoral commission forums that they do for candidates. It's always a kind of a safety concern. I know Shane Jones had to hire personal security because people were just walking into his house, which is not good. I think it starts with candidates starting out by respecting each other, and we're very lucky. We've got an amazing group of people that have all been campaigning very fairly and treating each other with respect and dignity. That's a very important thing, and as the others mentioned, calling it out when people take it too far. So, everyone's got a right to be angry, but no one's got a right to make someone else feel unsafe. I was in our South Dunedin office and had someone come in and threaten me. Thankfully, I worked in a bottle store for 5 years, so I was kind of used to it, but he was much bigger than me, and if I didn't have that experience, I would have felt significantly less safe.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I know there are lots more questions, but we have run out of time for these questions. And next up, that was probably a good question to finish on, actually. The humour, the respect, the dignity, and the fact that all our politicians are humans and with we hope, good hearts. Now, next we've got, we bring the candidates back to the lectern for our 4 reasons why. You'll get the hang of this as we get underway. So I'll draw the names from a hat, and first up is Rachel Brooking, and I'm going to ask her 4 reasons why we should vote for Labour. Why you should vote for Labour. Reason number 1, you should vote for Labour.
Focused on the cost of living, and that includes increasing wages for teachers and nurses.
Number 2 reason.
That we deliver for Dunedin. David's valedictory speech included Invamate, the $1.68 billion at the hospital, code, and of course, just over the electoral boundary, Hillside.
Number 3.
Labour's pragmatic but also values-based. We saved 20,000 lives over COVID, and really care about people.
Reason number 4.
We do some of the hard, grunty work, structural work, including in the environment. So that includes reforming the Resource Management Act. That was a big, long, tricky process. Also dealing with laws around housing density and what was a very unpopular 3 waters, but I think we've all been watching Queenstown and know that that is such an important thing for our economy and our health and our well-being.
Thank you, Rachel. Keegan. 4 reasons to vote for New Zealand First. Reason number 1.
Number 1 is we have a strong, experienced team. Our top 10 are all experts in their individual fields. They are amazing. They'll bring some real common sense and pragmatism around the cabinet table.
Number 2.
We will take on the international banks and supermarkets that are charging more here than they are overseas. We will tackle the foreign banks specifically by ensuring there's intense banking inquiries like they've had in Australia. They've had 5 in their Senate. We've had none in New Zealand. Banks are fleecing us. It's our money. We should be able to...
Number 3. Reason number 3. We're keeping them short.
Keeping them short, okay.
Yep.
We will bring in huge student loan reform. If you give us enough negotiating power, we have some really awesome student-written and student-focused student loan reforms.
And reason number 4 to vote for New Zealand First.
We will overhaul the health system with some very targeted and focused investment in things like medicine, the workforce, and different cancer screenings and the like.
Thank you. Jim O'Malley's next. Reason number 1.
Because I live here. I will go to Wellington and do what needs to be done for Dunedin, while others have talked about it. Informate was saved because the Vice Chancellor of Lincoln lost his job.
Reason number 2.
Anyway.
Sorry, reason number 2. We're keeping them short.
2033 movement is about social equity and getting this country back to where we were all equal New Zealanders, where someone being born in the country could go to wherever they wanted to be, and we didn't have to worry about what part of town we were born in.
Right, reason number 3, you should give your electoral vote to Jim O'Malley.
The combination of my experience in the City Council and interfacing with government means I actually see often as not how government spending actually operates in the city, and I can take that experience and bring it back up to Wellington to make sure again that it's operating well when it interacts with councils.
And number 4?
I have never had to backtrack on anything I've ever said.
Thank you. Marama Davidson. Reason number 1 to vote for the Greens.
There is no reason at all for anyone in this country to be missing out and to live a good quality life, so an income guarantee paid for by a wealth tax.
Reason number 2.
Climate action that reduces our climate pollution and puts money back into people's pockets, like our solar energy and clean power payment, for example.
Number 3.
Free dental for everyone, not just for people under 30 years old, because oral care should have been always included as public health care.
And reason number 4.
More Green MPs and more ministers around the decision-making table so that we can look after you today and our planet for your mokopuna 7 generations ahead.
Right, thank you. Reason number one to vote for the top. The top reason to vote for top.
The top reason to vote for top is to bring in a fresh new voice to Parliament. For too long we've been failed by the same parties election after election.
Number two reason.
We have to invest in our future. The teal card is a strong statement that we're investing in our future. Our young people deserve it.
Reason number three.
Climate change. We need strong climate action immediately, as quickly as we can, and top will bring that.
And reason number four.
To represent the South and work collaboratively with either Labour or National, whatever the event of the day is. Thank you.
And thank you, Ben. Reason number one, to vote for National.
We will crush inflation and restore discipline to government spending.
Reason number two.
We're going to address the reoffending that is terrorising shop owners across New Zealand, especially in the North Island.
Reason number three to vote for National.
We're going to have a relentless focus on outputs instead of inputs and announcements.
And fourth reason to vote for National is?
Because we really need your vote, because the bigger the National Party is, if we get in, the more options we have, the faster we can hit the ground running. We really want to get things back on track before Christmas. We can't mark ground trying to form a government.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Now, time for a wrap up. There are two notable absentees tonight. I want to thank David Clark and Michael Woodhouse for playing their part in these forums over many years. We also thank them both for all their efforts on behalf of Dunedin. I remember Michael at one of these meetings wisely saying that you learned the most from those with different views and on different sides. There they are in a 2017 meeting with Greens candidate Nikki Bolt in an ODT photo. I thank them for always getting into the spirit of the evening, just as I thank the six tonight. If it has all gone well, we plan to upload the film of tonight's meeting, thank you again, Bert, to YouTube. There's a channel there up on the screen, and we'll endeavour to spread the URL widely. The content, as they say, is also being supplied to Dunedin's Channel 39, and it may run early in the week on linear TV, we're not sure yet. A reminder about the Koha and the food bank. If you feel so moved and are able, there's the containers and bags and account number in the foyer. We'll be staying open for another half hour or so you can share and chat. Thank you all for coming and for your part in this evening's forum. It is a really special community event. And extra thanks to the candidates who are willing to be our representatives. It's a terribly tough and often thankless task. As you cast your vote, what would you do if your mother asked you? Thank you. Ngā mihi nui. Farewell. Aere rā.